the dimmest corners of the Mechanicum's memory, there lingers the trace of a name once spoken only in fear: Yelav Draykavac. His presence first emerges like a fracture in polished glass, a figure unaccounted for until the hour when the galaxy itself began to break. Cyclothraith, his domain, was a forge world whose voice had been silent in the symphony of Mars' dominion. Yet when the heresy tore open the galaxy, its lord revealed himself with an arsenal and a doctrine already prepared. He had been branded Heretek Ultima by the Great Synod of Mars during the Martian unification, a condemnation so final that few who bore it survived the week. Yet Draykavac endured, a spectre who vanished into the dark between data streams, returning only when he could wield catastrophe as a language. The genocide of Goth scoured a people until no remembrancer dared speak their tongue again. The Lucene travesty was a wound so deep that even the records of it have been bled dry, leaving only references to a void where a history should stand. 17 worlds of the Donya League were extinguished in his campaigns, their light snuffed so completely that the stars around them seemed to recoil. Each act was not senseless, but formulaic, a dark litany, an equation of annihilation written in the calculus of blood. Cyclothraith itself grew swollen with this purpose. Its manufactoria belched war machines inscribed with the principles of his obsession. Perfection, not as an aspiration, but as a decree. Fanes of iron and sanctuaries of circuitry pulsed with experiments that stripped flesh from meaning. Those who followed him were reforged, their humanity pressed into molds of steel and thoughtless servitude. Those who resisted became resources, bone ground to ash, souls braided into the resonance of his engines. Where Mars clung to the creed of the Omnissiah, Draykavac carved a counter-scripture, proclaiming that machine and God were no separate poles, but a single will he alone could define. There is a temptation, when reflecting on his works, to dismiss him as another mad heretic lost to the shadows. Yet consider the scale. Consider what it means when a man, already threaded with iron and logic, demands not progress but completion. The Mechanicum's bargain was always survival, enduring through alloy and augmentation. Draykavac's bargain was dominance, erasing all choice, reducing humanity to a variable in his proofs of perfection. His atrocities were not diversions from this path. They were essential demonstrations, the proof of his formula. By the time the Horus Heresy ignited, the name Draykavac was already a curse upon the lips of those who knew it. He was not a primarch, nor a commander of legions. His rank was stranger, a sovereign heretic, a sovereign executioner, a ruler who claimed no throne, but commanded allegiance through terror and machinecraft. Others followed Horus for loyalty, for pride, for vengeance. Draykavac followed no one. He rebelled because no empire, not even the emperors, could contain the tyranny of perfection he demanded. And so he set Cyclothraith aflame with industry, and from its furnaces he sent out engines of death to strike at the fragile dream of unity. When the oath cogitators of House Atrax first recorded their fealty to Cyclothraith, they could not have foreseen the fate that awaited them. The knightly house had once borne its banners with pride across the Great Crusade, their engines titanic extensions of noble will. Under Draykavac's ascendancy, those banners were stained, their litanies warped into hymns of massacre. As sovereign prelate, he claimed not only their forges, but their souls, bending their oaths until loyalty became a form of self-erasure. The Knights of Atrax marched no longer as guardians, but as butchers in deliberate procession. Worlds fell not in battle alone, but in staged annihilations that bore the mark of ritual. Populations were herded into cathedra of slaughter, where titanic war engines reduced them to crimson paste. Each campaign became a pogrom dressed in the language of perfection, a word Draykavac spoke as though it were both promise and command. To his followers, this word was revelation. To those who opposed him, it was a death sentence. Within Atrax's warfanes, the transformation deepened. Knights were altered in form and in spirit, their machine spirits grafted to blasphemous circuits, their pilots encased in bonds of iron that drained will and flooded thought with obedience. What had been a covenant of man and machine became a one-sided pact. the pilot reduced to fuel, the war engine exalted as vessel. The Atraxian rite of arming, once a proud ritual of lineage and faith, was reworked into a stripping away of identity. Only the word of Draykavac endured, carried in the vox howls of knights that no longer spoke with the voices of men. It is here that the true horror of Draykavac becomes evident. Atrocities like the genocide of Goth were grand spectacles, visible to those who counted losses by the million. But within the Atrax household, he perfected his philosophy at the intimate scale, eroding dignity and hollowing out traditions that had endured since Old Night. The Knights of Atrax became extensions of his will, their every campaign a theatre in which humanity itself was humiliated, enslaved, extinguished. The galaxy knew him as the bringer of perfection. Atrax knew him as master, tyrant, and jailer. How does one measure such corruption? How do we weigh the destruction of 17 worlds against the desecration of a single knightly house's soul? There is no clear arithmetic. Yet the testimony of survivors, fragmentary as it is, suggests that those who perished under Atrax's guns envied them. The living became perpetually trapped in a machinery of slaughter, unable to distinguish where their duty ended and Draykavac's will began. In this, there lies a deeper truth. Sometimes the gravest horror is not death, but the stripping away of all meaning before it. As the Horus Heresy widened, the name of House Atrax was etched onto every front where Draykavac's banners flew. Their knights appeared without heraldry, their armour adorned with symbols untranslatable to the loyalist Mechanicum. Some claimed to see the mark of demons flickering across their hulls. Others swore that Atrax's machines bled oil like blood, or whispered in human tongues when they fired. What is certain is that wherever Atrax deployed, survival rates among civilian populations collapsed. Worlds taken by them did not rebuild, they became grave markers scattered across the galaxy's dust. The Sacra Astra was no ordinary flagship. Witnesses describe it less as a void ship than as a temple adrift in the darkness, its hull sheathed in a geometry that defied conventional design. No shipwright of Mars claimed its lineage. Some even whispered it had been birthed whole from Cyclothraith's forges, a singular construct meant to bear not a fleet commander, but a messiah of iron. Within its cathedral decks, Draykavac housed entire legions of war automata, atriums of seized night engines, and laboratories where flesh was methodically reworked into mechanical psalms. As the heresy entered its later phases, the Sacra Astra became a phantom on the battlefield. It was recorded over the skies of paramilitary strongholds in the Segmentum Obscurus, appearing in auger traces above Imperial defences moments before whole bastions were extinguished. Entire fleets reported that Vox signals collapsed into screaming static when it drew near. Loyalist navies feared its silhouette more than even the warships of the Traitor legions, for where they fought as armies, the Sacra Astra struck like a scythe, precise, brutal, vanishing again into the warp. The last confirmed reports placed Draykavac's vessel on the edges of the Donian ruins, its prow carved with fresh sigils not recognised by any Mechanicum order. Those who claimed to see it swore that the ship itself was alive, that its hull flexed and shifted as though woven of sinew and circuit. Then, silence. No wreckage, no warp echoes, no trace. The Imperium declared Draykavac presumed lost, his ship dissolved into the immaterial sea. But the absence of evidence only sharpened his legend. Speculation has grown like mould around the mystery. Some say he attempted to ascend within the warp, offering himself as an avatar of mechanical perfection to the dark gods. Others claim the Sacra Astra was consumed by its own demonic machinery, dragging master and ship alike into a fate worse than destruction. There are even voices that whisper he survives still, moving between the stars as Data Ghost and Iron Soul, searching for new followers to graft into his design. For the Imperium, such uncertainty is intolerable. A known foe can be fought. A vanished one becomes an eternal shadow. What lesson lingers in the absence of closure? Perhaps it is this, that terror does not always end with death. The most enduring figures of the heresy are not always those whose bodies fell upon the fields of terror, but those who vanished, leaving only questions and silence. Yelav Draykavac remains such a figure. His crimes were real, his wars undeniable. yet his fate resists the neat conclusion of martyrdom or execution. Instead, we inherit a void where his name should have been buried, and in that void, the imagination of fear thrives. And maybe that is the deeper cruelty. To die is to be ended. To vanish is to remain possible. Across forge fanes and knightly households, some still dread that one day Cyclothraith's bringer of perfection will step once more from the shadows, not as memory, but as revenant. There is something profoundly unsettling about Draykavac's story. The Imperium calls him heretic, traitor, monster. All of that is true, yet the unease runs deeper. He shows us what happens when the pursuit of perfection ceases to be aspiration and becomes mandate. The Mechanicum always balanced the human and the machine, clinging to a creed that at least acknowledged mystery. Draykavac tore that balance away and replaced it with a demand for completion that could only be written in fire. His legacy is not simply one of destruction. It is the reminder that the quest to erase imperfection can end with the erasure of all life itself.